Imagine, if you will, standing entirely alone under this blinding hot spotlight.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying already.
Right. And you are holding a microphone. Your palms are like actively sweating.
Oh, yeah. The metal of the mic stand just feels cold and slippery.
Exactly. And staring back at you from the dark, this cavernous abyss of the room are 400 complete strangers.
Just sitting there in the dark.
Yeah, they're sitting there with their arms crossed. They are completely silent. And they are expecting you, demanding you, really to justify their ticket price.
Right, they want the magic.
They want you to make them laugh, and if you don't, they are fully prepared to just turn on you.
Instantly. It's a brutal environment.
It is. So now, I want you to imagine a filmmaker looking at that exact, terrifying, fragile magic and trying to trap it on a flat movie screen.
Oh, it's attempting to bottle lightning while wearing rubber gloves.
Bottling lightning, I love that.
Well, you are taking an art form that is inherently live, right?
Yeah.
It's inherently dangerous. It's built entirely on the unpredictable oxygen of the room.
Yeah.
And then you're forcing it into a heavily rehearsed, statically edited, 2-hour narrative structure.
Right. They just don't mesh.
The mechanics of the two mediums are just fundamentally opposed.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. We have gathered a massive stack of sources for you today.
We really have.
Yeah, we've got historical analyses from the British Film Institute, deep dive reviews on specific films like Punchline and The King of Comedy.
And a lot of behind-the-scenes accounts of television shows, too, like Crashing and Louie.
Exactly. Plus, some raw podcast transcripts featuring actual working comics.
Which are so illuminating.
They really are. So our mission today is to explore the history of fictional depictions of stand-up comedy in film and television.
Right.
We are going to examine the massive, sometimes really agonizing gap between the gritty, desperate reality of the comedy club stage and how Hollywood attempts to portray it.
Because cinema has always harbored this deep, almost voyeuristic obsession with the comedian.
Voyeuristic is a good word for it.
Yeah, directors are drawn to the psychology of the performer, the sheer audacity required to demand the attention of a room.
But when it comes to the execution, to actually showing the work on screen, the camera always seems to stumble.
It does. And we're going to look at the mechanical and, psychological reasons behind that failure.
We will explore the enduring sad clown trope, deconstruct the physical physics of why an actor trying to, fake being funny usually results in total disaster.
Yes, the faking funny aspect is fascinating.
And we'll also investigate how modern television, by entirely abandoning the cinematic playbook, might have actually finally cracked the code of authenticity.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that very idea of the comedian as a tragic figure.
Right, because if you look at the history of cinema, and this is highlighted perfectly in our sources from the Independent Picture House, and the BFI movies about comedians are almost universally bleak.
Oh, completely. They lean with their entire weight into this sad clown trope.
Yeah, it's that tragic irony of an individual who makes a living, manufacturing joy for others while internally operating in a state of complete misery.
Well, the juxtaposition is just irresistible for a visual storyteller.
How so?
You have the stark, lonely image of an individual on a stage exhibiting extreme vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you contrast that with their chaotic offstage reality.
Oh, absolutely.
Stand-up is fertile cinematic territory precisely because of that tension.
Okay.
In a physical comedy club, you, the audience member, you only know what the comic deliberately constructs for you.
You get the polished gem.
Exactly. But a film director wants to show you the mine.
That makes a lot of sense. The camera bypasses the jokes to show us the messy encounters, the substance abuse, the interpersonal wreckage.
All this stuff that fueled that hilarious 15-minute set.
Right. And the classics really establish this mold. Take Bob Fosse's Lenny from 1974.
Oh, what a film.
Yeah, you have Dustin Hoffman playing the legendary boundary-pushing comic Lenny Bruce.
And Fosse utilizes this incredibly striking black and white cinematography.
Yes. And a fractured, nonlinear narrative. It really mimics the chaotic headspace of his subject.
It does. But what stands out, is that the film charts Bruce's battles with heroin addiction and his highly volatile relationship with his wife, Honey.
Who was a burlesque dancer, right?
Right. And then, of course, his exhausting legal fights against unjust obscenity charges.
It focuses obsessively on his offstage demons. It almost treats his onstage brilliance as a secondary characteristic.
Which is why Lenny illustrates a fundamental structural problem with the comedy biopic.
What do you mean?
Well, Fosse is a master director, And Hoffman's performance is technically astounding. But the actual comedy Bruce performed isn't the engine of the film. It's much easier for a film to dramatize why someone was historically important or legally controversial than it is to translate why they were actually entertaining to sit and watch in a smoky nightclub in the early 1960s.
Right. The danger Bruce presented to the establishment is palpable on screen, but the sheer entertainment value gets kind of lost in the translation of the trauma. So is watching a comedy biopic essentially like watching a magic trick where the magician is openly weeping the entire time?
That is a perfect analogy.
Like, you can clearly see the mechanics of how the illusion is performed, you understand the sleight of hand, but the joy and the wonder of the trick are completely extinguished.
Because the mechanics of the biopic actively destroy the mechanics of the joke.
Right.
Our sources, specifically the Finding the Punchline piece, note that the absolute best stand-up material almost always has an expiration date.
Oh, because it's topical.
Yes, it relies on the cultural friction of the exact moment it was spoken.
That makes sense.
The article actually jokes about casting a modern actor like Timothée Chalamet to play George Carlin.
Oh my God, I can't even picture that.
Right. If you have an actor memorize a 30-year-old routine, it loses all of its original context. Without the societal tension that generated the joke, the punchline just floats in a vacuum.
It fails to translate to a modern audience because the world the joke was built for no longer exists.
Precisely.
It's like reading a court transcript of a great party you weren't invited to. You can see the words that were spoken, but you can't feel the temperature of the room.
That's spot on.
But, you know, some filmmakers bypass the historical biopic route entirely. They avoided the expiration date problem by just making the comedian the director and star of their own thinly veiled autobiography.
Yes. Richard Pryor did exactly this.
Yeah, in 1986 with Joe Dancer, Your Life is Calling.
Pryor wrote, directed, and starred in that film. The protagonist's name is Jojo, but make no mistake, this is Richard Pryor surgically dissecting his own life on screen.
It's so raw. The specific details he chose to recreate are staggering when you consider the vulnerability required to film them.
I mean, he's portraying his childhood growing up in a brothel run by his grandmother.
Right, and depicting his highly destructive relationships with his 5 wives.
And most shockingly, he forces the audience to watch a recreation of the near-fatal incident where he set himself on fire while allegedly freebasing cocaine.
Yeah, there is a sequence in that film that just burns itself into your memory. He performs a frantic striptease drag routine, and then, still fully in drag, violently wields a gun at a group of gangsters.
It is absolute chaos.
So chaotic.
But to understand Jojo Dancer, you have to look past traditional film critique and look at the psychological utility of the project.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The BFI source notes that while there are extremely funny passages, the film is primarily striking for its terrifying rawness.
Because Pryor wasn't trying to make a tight 3-act comedy.
Exactly. He was using the medium of cinema to actively work through his trauma in real time. It feels less like a movie and more like a public confession.
Wow.
It was actually the only movie he ever directed.
Really? Just that one?
Just that one. The prevailing theory is that he simply said every single painful thing he needed to say with that one deeply personal project, emptying his psychological vault onto the screen.
It functions as a cinematic exorcism. He burned the demons so he didn't have to carry them anymore.
That's exactly what it was.
Well, moving from the solo tortured genius to the dynamic of a duo, we have to look at The Sunshine Boys from 1975.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah, this film approaches the sad clown trope from the angle of a deeply broken, long-term creative partnership.
It was adapted from Neil Simon's play, and it follows Willie Clark and Al Lewis.
Right. These are men who constituted an incredibly popular vaudeville act, working side by side for over 40 years.
But changing comedic tastes and this fierce, unspoken resentment just split them up entirely.
Yeah, and the narrative engine is Willie's nephew and agent, Ben, desperately trying to reunite them for a lucrative television comedy special.
Which is a Herculean task, because the two men harbor such deep-seated animosity that they refuse to even occupy the same physical room.
The casting alone on that one is a brilliant piece of Hollywood trivia. You had George Burns, who was 79 years old at the time.
And he hadn't made a movie in 35 years.
Exactly. And playing opposite him is Walter Matthau, who is only 55 but played a character 2 decades older than himself.
He adopted the posture and the bitterness of an octogenarian perfectly.
He really did. It explores the severe difficulties of a long-term creative marriage in comedy.
And it underscores a vital, recurring theme in the depiction of comedy.
Which is?
that the people generating the loudest, most unified laughs from the audience are often harboring deep-seated resentments, crippling anxieties, or straightforward hatred for the very person standing 3 feet away from them on stage.
Right. The synchronized bow at the end of the set is a lie.
A total lie.
Well, let's follow that dark thread even further. If we move from the sad clown to the genuinely terrifying predatory clown, we land on Martin Scorsese's 1982 cult classic, The King of Comedy.
Oh, what a phenomenal pivot. Scorsese abandons the traditional biopic entirely here.
He creates a film that masterfully dances on the razor-thin wire between dark comedy and psychological horror.
For those of you listening who haven't experienced it, the plot is deeply unsettling.
It really is. It follows Rupert Pupkin, played with chilling precision by Robert De Niro.
Pupkin is an erratic, unfailingly polite, but deeply, deeply dangerous superfan.
Yeah, he wants to be a stand-up comedian more than anything in the universe. But instead of going to open mics and writing jokes,
his grand plan is to literally kidnap beloved late-night television host Jerry Langford, played by real-life comedy legend Jerry Lewis.
Which is just wild. Pupkin demands a primetime slot on Langford's show as the ransom.
And De Niro's preparation for the role of Pupkin was famously extreme.
I read about this. He didn't just study scripts, right?
No, he spent months lurking in actual comedy clubs, obsessively studying the working stand-ups.
Wow.
But he wasn't watching their jokes. He was studying their desperate rhythm, their micro-expressions when a joke failed, and that palpable hunger for validation in their delivery.
I also read that his dynamic with Jerry Lewis behind the scenes was incredibly hostile, completely by design.
Yes, De Niro was committed to maintaining the parasocial, toxic dynamic of their characters. He explicitly refused to have dinner with Jerry Lewis or socialize during production.
Just completely iced him out.
He treated Lewis not as a fellow actor, but as the distant, arrogant idol he was both revering and preparing to psychologically destroy. De Niro famously told Scorsese he needed to be at his throat and ready to kill him to accurately portray Pupkin's twisted ambition.
That is intense. What's fascinating, too, is the trivia about the film's early development. Bob Fosse, who directed Lenny, was actually the initial choice to direct The King of Comedy.
Yeah, and Fosse wanted Andy Kaufman to play Rupert Pupkin.
Wait, Andy Kaufman?
Yes, but casting Kaufman would have resulted in a profoundly different and likely less effective film.
How so?
Well, Kaufman lived in a constant, impenetrable state of performance art. He blurred reality so thoroughly that having him play a delusional fan might have been too meta.
Oh, it would have felt like a prank on the audience.
Exactly. Scorsese's genius was casting De Niro, which grounded the delusion in a very frightening, mundane reality.
Right. Pupkin isn't a flamboyant comic book villain. He's the incredibly average-looking guy sitting next to you on the subway, quietly murmuring to himself.
And it makes me think about how you, the listener, interact with the internet today. Pupkin is the ultimate embodiment of main character syndrome decades before social media even existed.
Yes. He is the guy leaving terrifyingly familiar comments on a celebrity's Instagram, genuinely believing they are secret best friends.
It's chilling. The film builds to a climax that is honestly agonizing to watch. Pupkin achieves his goal. He gets on the stage under the bright lights, while Langford is literally bound and taped to a chair in a basement.
It's so uncomfortable.
Pupkin delivers his monologue, and in the middle of it, he confesses to the audience exactly what he did. He tells them he committed a felony kidnapping to get the spot.
And the terrifying part, the audience laughs.
Because they assume it's just a brilliant, edgy, avant-garde persona.
Right. And then Pupkin delivers the thesis statement of his life. Better to be king for a night than a schmuck for a lifetime.
The debate over the ending is still raging today. After that said, the film shows us news reports of Pupkin's phenomenal overnight success. He gets a best-selling autobiography titled King for a Night and a lavish television special celebrating his genius.
The movie leaves you hanging over a cliff, like, is this eventual fame objective reality, or is it just the final terminal delusion of a maniac rotting in a prison cell?
Scorsese heavily referenced the influence of British director Michael Powell for that sequence. Powell championed the idea of making a fantasy sequence so hyper-realistic, so detailed, that it becomes more real than reality.
Right, because Scorsese provides no visual cues. No blurry screen edges, no dreamlike lighting to tell you it isn't real.
Exactly. You cannot locate the scene where the objective world ends and Pupkin's narcissistic hallucination takes over.
The legacy of the King of Comedy is astonishing when you consider how it was initially received. It was a massive commercial bomb.
Massive.
It cost $19 million to shoot and scrape together only $2.5 million at the box office. Audiences in 1983 outright rejected it. It was too ugly, too uncomfortable.
But if you watch it today, it is prophetic. It perfectly predicted the toxicity of modern celebrity culture, the terrifying entitlement of the superfan, and the violent lengths people will go to in order to trend for 15 minutes.
It served as the direct, undeniable blueprint for Todd Phillips's 2019 blockbuster Joker.
Oh, undeniably. But looking at the character of Rupert Pupkin forces us to ask a mechanical question.
Which is?
Does Pupkin actually harbor any desire to be a comedian? Does he want to sit in a diner at 2 a.m. writing and rewriting the setup to a joke about airline food?
Probably not.
Or does he merely want the byproduct of comedy? He wants the adulation, the control of the room, the spotlight, without possessing a shred of inherent talent or willingness to do the grueling labor.
That's such a great point. But Pupkin's lack of actual stand-up talent transitions us into a massive problem Hollywood faces when they do want to show the work. Why is it so incredibly hard to cast an A-list actor to play a working comedian?
Well, because the act of performing stand-up is a highly specialized, deeply unnatural physical and psychological skill set. When actors attempt it, they fall victim to what our sources call the karaoke effect.
The karaoke effect. I love this concept.
It's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, the Finding the Punchline article argues that watching an actor perform a memorized stand-up routine, a routine written by a team of screenwriters, inevitably feels like watching bad karaoke.
You know, all the words are technically correct, but the soul just isn't there.
Exactly.
Consider the physics of the two professions. An actor is rigorously trained to deliver lines to a scene partner. They hit a physical mark on the floor, they deliver the line exactly as written, and they react to the other actor.
Yeah, right.
But a stand-up comedian's scene partner is a 400-headed monster sitting in the dark. That monster breathes differently every single night.
The comedian doesn't just recite, they surf the wave of the audience.
Right, they make micro-adjustments in real time. If a joke lands perfectly, they pause to let the laughter swell. If someone coughs or a glass breaks in the back of the room, a real comic incorporates it seamlessly into the rhythm.
And an actor operating from a memorized script freezes. They wait for the laugh track that isn't there. They lack the muscle memory to ride the wave.
We see this exact failure play out in the 1988 film Punchline.
Yes. You have Tom Hanks playing Stephen Gold, a manic medical school dropout who moonlights as an edgy, aggressive comic.
And you have Sally Field playing Lila, a dedicated New Jersey housewife desperately trying to break into the local open mic scene.
And the physical preparation Hanks went through for this was basically torture.
Hanks put himself through a self-inflicted stand-up boot camp. 2 months before the cameras rolled, he wrote a 5-minute act from scratch and walked onto the stage at the legendary Comedy Store in Los Angeles.
He didn't just bomb, he experienced a total system failure.
Hanks described the physical sensation as pure flop sweat time. His nervous system betrayed him. His first set lasted exactly 1 minute and 40 seconds.
A minute and 40 seconds? That is brutal.
He completely ran out of material because his delivery was rushed, and he had no underlying perspective or theme to anchor his panic.
Wow.
But he forced himself to keep doing it. He would hit 3 different clubs a night for a month, just trying to build enough callus to stand under the lights without sweating through his shirt.
Did it help?
Eventually, he had to tap out and hire real, working comics, Randy Fexer and Barry Sobel, to teach him the actual math of writing a setup and a punchline. He performed over 30 times in clubs across LA and New York before filming.
And yet, despite putting himself through the meat grinder, the critical consensus was that you never entirely buy Hanks or Field as real working comics.
Not really. They look like incredibly talented dramatic actors who have successfully memorized a very long monologue.
Except for one specific scene.
Oh, the hospital scene.
Yes. There's a sequence in a hospital where Hanks's character, Stephen, is surrounded by a group of heavily injured patients. He starts aggressively making fun of their traction halos and casts, using a barrage of comedy to distract them from their physical pain.
In that moment, he shines.
He really does. Why does that scene work so much better?
Because it doesn't require the strict mechanics of a stage routine. It captures the psychological allure of stand-up for a specific type of personality. Stephen walks into a room of suffering, dominates the verbal space, and briefly becomes the omnipotent god of that universe.
He controls the emotional temperature of the room.
Precisely. However, the film structurally collapses when it shifts focus to Sally Field's storyline.
Right, the narrative constantly pulls away from the comedy club to focus on Lila's domestic family life.
It just drains the kinetic energy of the film and transforms it into a maudlin daytime drama.
The behind-the-scenes studio politics of Punchline are fascinating, too. Dawn Steele, who had recently taken over Columbia Pictures, looked at the finished film and panicked.
Really? What did she do?
She actually held the release of Punchline hostage until after Tom Hanks's other movie, Big, hit theaters in 1988.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. She knew Punchline was a dark, difficult sell, so she waited for Hanks to become a massive, lovable superstar with Big so she could use his newfound capital to market the comedy film.
And her strategy yielded a respectable $21 million gross, but no amount of marketing could mask the core issue of the karaoke effect.
No, it couldn't.
And if you think this is just an artifact of 80s cinema, look at Robert De Niro's return to the genre in the 2016 film The Comedian.
De Niro stepping back into the comedy world should have been a monumental event.
It really should have. He plays Jackie Burke, an aging, foul-mouthed comic icon who is deeply resentful that his audiences only want to hear the catchphrases from his old, cheesy television sitcom.
After he literally punches an audience member who tries to film his routine, he's sentenced to community service at a soup kitchen where he sparks a relationship with a character played by Leslie Mann.
It sounds like a formula for success, but the film was an unmitigated disaster.
It opened to a staggering $892,000 against a nearly $10 million budget. The critics dismantled it.
But the failure is highly instructive for our deep dive. Look at the contrast. De Niro flawlessly executed the idea of a comedian when he played the psychotic fan Rupert Pupkin.
Right. He nailed the psychology.
But in The Comedian, he is tasked with actually standing in front of a microphone and delivering standard observational joke setups.
Yeah.
And it completely flatlines.
You can visibly see him reciting lines rather than generating them.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how the karaoke effect proves that you cannot fake the thousands of hours of muscle memory required to command a room.
But De Niro's failure in The Comedian proves that throwing A-list money and Oscar-caliber talent at the problem doesn't work. So if acting chops can't fake it, you have to change the entire methodology.
You have to stop casting actors and start casting the comics themselves.
And no one realized that faster or capitalized on it more heavily than Judd Apatow.
Oh, the Apatow era represents a massive paradigm shift. By 2009, Apatow had achieved era-defining astronomical success with films like The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up.
He didn't just direct hits. He spawned an entirely new, dominant vernacular in American comedy.
He really did.
I compare it to a rock band that drops two universally beloved chart-topping pop albums. Suddenly, the record executives walk in and say, here is a blank check, go into the studio and do whatever you want.
And the band emerges a year later with a sprawling, indulgent, heavily experimental 2.5-hour double album.
Right. Apatow had the golden keys to the Universal Studios lot, and he drove the golf cart absolutely everywhere. He pitched Funny People, demanding a massive runtime, and the studio was too afraid to say no.
Funny People was the ultimate passion project.
Yeah.
Apatow attempted to fuse two incredibly heavy, disparate concepts.
What were they?
On one hand, it's a dramatic exploration of how surviving a near-death experience, specifically terminal cancer, alters a person's morality. On the other hand, it functions as a highly abstract insider analysis of the predatory nature of working comedians.
He casts Adam Sandler as George Simmons, an aging, insanely wealthy, isolated movie star and stand-up who gets diagnosed with a rare blood disease.
And he casts Seth Rogen as Ira Wright, a struggling, naive young comic George hires to write jokes for him.
The secret sauce here is that Sandler and Rogen aren't really stretching. They are essentially playing slightly altered, parallel universe versions of themselves.
Exactly. By populating the cast with actual stand-ups, Sandler, Rogen, Jonah Hill, Jason Schwartzman, Apatow bypasses the karaoke effect entirely.
These actors are spontaneously funny for a living.
When they are standing in the kitchen tearing each other down, the backstage banter feels incredibly vicious and authentic. The film revels in the microscopic nuances of joke writing and the jealous, competitive scrap for stage time.
It is intensely personal for Apatow. He weaves his actual life into the celluloid.
He really does.
The film literally opens with a grainy home video he shot himself in the early 1990s, featuring a young Adam Sandler making prank phone calls in their shared, messy LA apartment.
And he cast his real-life wife, Leslie Mann, as the woman George let get away, and their actual daughters play her children.
He even cast Paul Reiser as himself. Apatow actually interviewed Reiser for his high school radio show when he was just a 15-year-old kid desperately trying to learn the secrets of comedy.
And the entire mentor-mentee dynamic between Sandler and Rogen, that was heavily modeled on Apatow's own early career when a young, unknown Judd was hired to write jokes for Roseanne Barr.
However, while the authenticity of the comedy club environment is unimpeachable, the film suffers critically from massive genre confusion.
Oh yeah, it clocks in at 2 hours and 26 minutes. Sustaining a comedic narrative for that length is notoriously difficult.
The film violently wrestles with its own identity. Is it a biting parody of shallow Hollywood elites? Is it a somber medical drama about mortality? Or is it a niche, insider documentary about the mechanics of stand-up?
By attempting to be the definitive encyclopedic statement on all three subjects, the pacing stalls entirely. As the Punchline article sharply notes, the hallmark of a great stand-up comedian is the editorial ruthlessness required to trim a bloated 20-minute set down to a killer 15 minutes.
Right. And Apatow lacked that exact editorial ruthlessness in the editing bay.
The pacing issue is the insurmountable wall for cinema. Stand-up comedy is short, punchy, and episodic. Movies require a long, sustained three-act narrative structure.
The two simply don't fit together gracefully, which means if we want to capture the reality of the comedian, we have to look at the medium that natively operates in episodic bursts.
Television.
Television.
Television inherently thrives where film struggles. The episodic format of a TV series perfectly mirrors the grueling, repetitive, cyclical reality of a comedian's life.
It can capture the 6 clubs a night, every single night grind.
A TV show allows for a gradual, messy accumulation of small experiences and failures, rather than forcing a tidy cinematic climax onto a lifestyle that is defined by its lack of resolution.
Let's look at the HBO show Crashing, created by and starring comedian Pete Holmes.
The origin story of how this show got greenlit is simultaneously hilarious and devastating.
Pete Holmes is hosting his real-life late-night talk show on TBS. He's doing a comedy sketch with Judd Apatow where he pitches Apatow terrible, unmakeable movie ideas.
Right. And as part of the sketch, Pete pitches an idea based entirely on his own actual lived trauma.
A religious, incredibly naive youth pastor whose wife cheats on him after 6 years of marriage, leaving him entirely homeless and sleeping on couches.
And Apatow's unscripted response to this pitch is, that doesn't seem like a comedy at all. That just seems tragic and sad.
But Pete's friend, the actor Brian Sucka, pulls him aside and says, you need to adapt that specific tragedy into a one-man show.
That seed eventually grows into the pilot for Crashing.
And the granular, gritty details they kept from Pete's real life are amazing. In reality, Pete's wife actually cheated on him with a small Italian man named Rocco.
For the TV show, they changed the guy to a goofy hippie named Leaf, played by George Basil, to make it slightly more absurd, but the emotional core of the betrayal is identical.
Pete is left adrift, wandering the streets of New York, literally crashing on the couches of much more successful, deeply cynical comedians.
The genius of Crashing lies in its casting. It heavily integrates real-life comedians playing heightened, monstrous versions of themselves.
The most profound example is Artie Lange.
Lange's involvement in the first season brought a chaotic, dangerous, undeniable authenticity to the show that no actor could have simulated.
Artie Lange's audition story is legendary. He was brought in for a totally different, minor background character that only had 2 lines.
But Apatow, who was directing the pilot, saw Artie and told him to just throw the script in the trash.
Seriously, just threw it out?
Yeah, he told Lange to just improvise, using the darkest stories from Lange's own brutally honest autobiography, Too Fat to Fish. Lange riffed so brilliantly that the writers scrambled, and within a week, the entire character was rewritten to just be Artie Lange, and they were paying him $15 grand an episode.
The production methods Apatow utilized on set were uncompromising, too. To accurately capture the excruciating, soul-crushing feeling of a comedian bombing on stage, Apatow refused to use standard TV tricks.
He wouldn't just tell the background extras to politely stop laughing.
Instead, he forced Pete Holmes to stand on stage and perform his actual historic, terrible, early stand-up material 4 or 5 times in a row for the exact same crowd of extras.
That is brutal.
By the 5th take, the extras weren't acting. They were genuinely sick and tired of hearing the jokes. They gave off an aura of hostile boredom.
The cameras captured the authentic, heavy atmosphere of a comedian dying a slow, public death.
That is beautifully cruel directing. But Crashing, with its journey of a young comic learning the ropes, still adhered to a somewhat traditional narrative arc. The true titan of stand-up television, the show that completely burned down the rulebook, was Louie.
Louie was a revolution in television syntax. Louis C.K. approached the FX network and accepted a remarkably modest offer.
A shoestring budget of just $200,000 to cover his own acting fee and the entire production cost of the pilot episode.
But he demanded a trade. In exchange for the low budget, he received total, unprecedented, zero-interference creative control.
He directed, wrote, edited, and starred in every episode.
He shot it using relatively cheap red cameras and literally edited the final cuts on his personal MacBook while riding the subway.
Because there were no studio executives giving him notes about likability or story arcs, he completely abandoned traditional sitcom pacing.
John Landgraf, the president of FX, brilliantly described the episodes as extended vignettes. There was zero obligation to tie a neat bow at the end of 22 minutes.
You would just get these surreal, intensely uncomfortable, highly specific situations.
The show freely embraced absurdism and dark, gallows humor, alongside gritty, slice-of-life realism. You had sequences like Louie enduring a brutally awkward, physically painful encounter with a deeply neurotic, dedophobic dentist.
Or a profound, terrifying childhood flashback featuring a Catholic doctor graphically detailing the physics of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ to a young, traumatized Louie.
My favorite is the nitrous oxide dream.
Oh, yes. Louie is high on laughing gas at the dentist, and he hallucinates a surreal dream sequence where he meets Osama bin Laden.
He doesn't fight him. He just awkwardly tells him, "I think 9/11 was a bullshit move. I don't mean to offend you, but I think you're an asshole."
It's totally bizarre, hilarious, and completely unpredictable.
CK also bluntly flouted the most basic, foundational rules of television continuity. He treated the audience's expectation of a cohesive universe with total disregard.
Like when an actress named Amy Landecker plays Louie's ill-fated, highly complicated date in a Season 1 episode.
Just 2 episodes later, that exact same actress is cast to play the younger version of Louie's own mother in a flashback.
A brother introduced in the first season is unceremoniously replaced by a sister in the next season, with zero explanation.
CK stated openly that every episode was a standalone short film with its own specific emotional goal. If Episode 4 contradicted the reality of Episode 3, he simply didn't care.
But that lack of continuity served the tone so well. It created this melancholic, existential, almost dreamlike look at being a middle-aged divorced father of 2 girls who just happens to process his life through comedy.
And because actors recognized the genius of the writing, the guest casting was insane. He got the legendary director David Lynch to step in front of the camera to play Jack Dow.
This brash, terrifyingly tough TV executive who is tasked with coaching Louie to take over a major late-night talk show.
Getting Lynch is a story of incredible luck and timing. They originally considered casting heavyweights like Al Pacino, Jerry Lewis, and Woody Allen for the role.
They were very close to offering it to the legendary actor Ben Gazzara, but in a darkly comedic twist of fate, Gazzara tragically died on the exact same day they were formally considering him.
Ultimately, Lynch took the role and delivered a mesmerizing, intimidating performance that grounded the absurdity of the late-night television machine.
But I have to push back a little on how we categorize shows like Louie and even Crashing. Critics love to call it cringe comedy, but Louie frequently dares to not be funny at all for long, long stretches of screen time.
It dwells in actual, quiet pain.
Does this mean the ultimate, most authentic show about stand-up comedy is actually just a tragedy that occasionally splices in a laugh track from the club scenes?
That is the central paradox of the medium, and it is entirely intentional. The pain in these shows isn't played purely for nervous sitcom laughter. The anguish is treated with immense respect.
Right.
The actual stand-up segments in Louie act as a psychological release valve. They are the rare moments where the character seems remotely in control of his environment.
He takes the chaos, the rejection, and the absurdity of the vignettes we just watched, and he reframes them into a structured, controllable narrative that commands applause.
It shows the listener exactly how much the comic needs those 5 minutes on stage just to stay sane. It's survival mechanics, not just entertainment.
That survival mechanic is driving the modern era of cinematic stand-up. We are seeing a massive shift. Recent movies are finally moving away from the megastar biopics and focusing intensely on the inside baseball of the working-class grind.
They are also elevating diverse voices and experiences, changing the types of stories being told.
The evolution is clear. If we look at a film like The Opening Act from 2020, directed by working comedian Steve Byrne, we get a meticulous detailing of the rigid, almost militaristic hierarchy of the comedy club.
The film explains the mechanics, The MC is the host, tasked with warming up a cold crowd and taking the bullets.
The feature act is the middle management, tasked with building the energy for 30 minutes while often sleeping in a van.
And the national headliner is the god of the night, untouchable and isolated.
Steve Byrne wanted to show the unglamorous reality. He shows the torture of the early morning drive time radio interviews where a hungover comic has to interact with painfully wacky sound effect abusing DJs to sell 12 tickets.
He shows the psychology of dealing with aggressive hecklers, and he highlights the golden rule of the road.
Which is, nothing good happens after midnight when you're hanging out in a bleak motel with the feature act.
Other movies have captured these weird, highly specific details too. Take This Is My Life from 1992, directed by Nora Ephron. It features a comic who specializes in fish couplets.
Fish couplets?
Yes. For context, a fish couplet is a highly specific, slightly hacky style of joke-telling involving rhyming puns about seafood.
Oh, wow.
It highlights the rhythm-based, sometimes hollow filler that working comics use to survive a set when the crowd is dead. It's a detail only an insider would know to include.
Exactly. The film also features a napkin eating agent, which is just brilliant. Or look at Man on the Moon, the Andy Kaufman biopic, which shows him deliberately wrong-footing and torturing audiences by reading F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby out loud, page by page, instead of telling jokes.
But the most significant shift we are seeing recently is how comedy is explicitly portrayed as a mechanism for processing profound trauma, particularly by female comedians and marginalized voices.
It is a complete departure from the 1970s trope. We are no longer watching the destructive male genius who is crushed by society, as seen in Lenny.
We're watching individuals use the art form to rebuild. In All About Nina from 2018, Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays a comic who suffers from such severe anxiety that she violently vomits before every single set.
Her comedy is visceral, blackly acerbic, and she is using the microphone to literally and figuratively run across the country to escape a tragic, abusive past.
The jokes are a shield.
We see that same therapeutic utility in the 2023 film I Used to Be Funny. Rachel Sennett plays a comedian dealing with severe, paralyzing PTSD.
She completely stops performing, losing her voice entirely while she obsessively searches for a missing teenager she used to nanny.
The film explores what happens when the trauma is too heavy to be converted into a punchline.
Conversely, we have films that subvert the depressing tropes entirely to find warmth. The Big Sick from 2017, written by Kumail Nanjiani and Emily V. Gordon, is based on their astonishing true story.
Kumail plays himself, navigating a painful breakup with Emily just before she unexpectedly falls into a medically induced coma.
It proves that a film about a comedian doesn't have to be acerbic, cynical, or bleak. It can possess immense warmth, familial friction, and profound catharsis while remaining hyper-authentic to the realities of the Chicago stand-up scene.
And looking ahead, the trend continues. We have Is This Thing On, slated for 2025. Directed by Bradley Cooper and starring Will Arnett, it's being described as a comedy of remarriage.
Arnett plays an older guy who goes through an amicable divorce, realizes he's completely adrift and can't even pay the cover charge at a local cafe, and pivots to doing terrifying open mics at the Comedy Cellar just to find a new purpose in a community.
It's comedy as a life raft.
The trajectory is undeniable. The cinematic lens has shifted from observing the comic as a tragic curiosity to understanding comedy as an active therapeutic tool.
It's no longer about watching a genius self-destruct. It's about watching a fractured human being use a microphone and a crowd to put the pieces of their life back together.
But, you know, the absolute ultimate, most bizarre intersection of real working comedy and Hollywood fiction happened recently. And the irony is that it wasn't even the main plot of the movie.
To perfectly illustrate how strange it gets when you drop a real comic into a fake cinematic world, we have to talk about a story from the KFC Radio podcast featuring real-life working comedian Sam Morrill.
This is a remarkable anecdote regarding the production of the 2019 billion-dollar film Joker, directed by Todd Phillips, which, bringing our deep dive full circle, was the film heavily inspired by the king of comedy.
Right, so Todd Phillips is casting the movie, and he needs someone to play a comedian performing on stage at a club called Dangerfields, and he specifically cast Sam Morrill.
According to Morrill on the podcast, Phillips explicitly stated he didn't want a UCB pussy in the role.
To clarify the jargon for the listener, UCB refers to the Upright Citizens Brigade. It is a legendary theater dedicated to long-form improv comedy.
The culture of UCB is heavily built on the yes-and philosophy. It is supportive, collaborative, and populated by trained theater actors.
Phillips was using the term derogatorily to say he didn't want a polished, supportive actor pretending to do stand-up.
He wanted the gritty, adversarial, lone wolf cadence of an actual club comic who knows how to survive a hostile room.
So Morrill gets the job. He is placed on stage in the background of the shot, and he is tasked with essentially live riffing for hours, while Joaquin Phoenix, playing the deeply disturbed Arthur Fleck, acts out his intense, dramatic scenes sitting at a table in the crowd.
But there was a massive mechanical constraint placed on Morrill. Because Joker is a period piece set in the early 1980s, Morrill had to frantically filter his rapid-fire set in real time.
He had a producer talking into an earpiece, and he had to constantly remember to cut out any modern references from his crowd work.
No jokes about iPhones, the internet, modern politics, or Uber. He just had to keep generating era-appropriate material take after take for hours, so the background extras wouldn't start delivering fake canned laughter at hearing the exact same joke repeatedly.
And the dynamic between Morrill and the other actors on set perfectly encapsulates the bizarre tension we've been unpacking today. Chris Redd, who is a wildly talented, high-profile cast member from Saturday Night Live, was cast as the host of the comedy club in the movie.
But Chris Redd's only line of dialogue in the entire massive production was, "One more time for Sam Morrill."
According to Morrill, Redd was getting genuinely increasingly annoyed as the 12-hour shoot dragged on.
You have to appreciate the irony. Morrill, the lesser-known club comic, is up on stage getting to show off, doing actual killer comedy bits for hours and receiving praise from the director.
Meanwhile, Redd, an actual famous sketch comedy star who is used to being the center of attention on national television, just has to stand in the corner like a piece of furniture and introduce Morrill over and over and over again.
It beautifully highlights the fragile egos and the rigid hierarchy inherent in the performance space. But more importantly, it proves the thesis of our entire discussion. If a director wants to capture the authentic, crackling energy of stand-up on film, they cannot script it. They have to surrender control, put a working comedian in front of a microphone and just let them do their job, even if they are relegated to the blurry background of the shot.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The most authentic, rapid-fire, genuinely funny stand-up performance captured on a major Hollywood film in recent years wasn't even the focus of a grand Oscar bait biopic.
No, it wasn't.
It was a blurred-out background detail in a relentlessly dark, violent superhero origin story.
It serves as a fitting summary. We have seen the film industry attempt every conceivable method to capture this magic.
They have tried big-budget dramatic biopics with Lenny.
They have thrown A-list dramatic actors at the problem with Hanks and De Niro, resulting in the karaoke effect.
And they have finally found success by abandoning cinema entirely for indie, shoestring, auteur-driven television like Louie.
The ultimate conclusion seems to be that you simply cannot write a script for desperation. You cannot synthesize genuine flop sweat in a makeup trailer, and you cannot replicate the immediate, visceral, terrifying feedback loop of a live audience in an editing bay.
If you want it to feel real, you have to let the people who live in the dark do what they do best.
Knowledge is only truly valuable when it is applied. Comedians apply our darkest, most uncomfortable societal truths to the stage. They act as alchemists, transforming collective pain into involuntary laughter.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Watching them try to do that on screen and watching them either profoundly fail or miraculously succeed in the translation acts as a mirror to our own vulnerabilities. It reminds us of how incredibly difficult it is to be truly seen, understood, and accepted by our fellow human beings.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. We spent this entire time dissecting how incredibly hard it is for serious dramatic actors to step into the shoes of a stand-up comedian. But I want you to consider the reverse scenario. Almost every truly great generation-defining comedian, from Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, to Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, to Jim Carrey in Eternal Sunshine, to Monique in Precious, eventually tries their hand at serious, heavy, dramatic acting.
And they are often brilliant at it.
Why is it that the people who spend their entire lives mastering the exceedingly difficult art of making us laugh are ultimately so obsessed with proving they can make us cry? Think about that the next time you watch your favorite comic pop up on the big screen.